Hi, I'm Simon Napier-Bell. I've been a music manager for one hell of a long time now, about 50 years. I also write books and I make films. And I think I'm here today because I made a film called The Real George Michael, which these guys want to talk to me about. And welcome to the music.
All right. Where are you? You're not in North America or Europe, are you?
No, I'm in Thailand.
Is that home now for you?
Yeah, it's been home for about 20 years. I
Oh
mean,
wow.
home is usually an airplane or an airport. But when I finished with that, this is where I come back to.
This is where you come. Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, listen, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
And first off, congrats on the documentary. It was very informative. Some things that I did not know are in there, and a lot of things to sort of make you sit back and think about George Michael, the person, the singer, the activist. But yeah, a very good doc. Thank you for putting that together.
Thank you. Well, I mean, there were things in there I didn't know before I met it too, which is one of the reasons I wanted to make it, to see what I could learn.
What surprised you? What did you learn from this?
Well, I managed him, and I used to go to the recording studio with him, but I never knew that he didn't write his lyrics down. I just didn't notice it. And but every producer we talked to said, totally amazing. He never wrote lyrics down. He kept them in his head. I'm sure he wrote them before he got to them. It appeared he made them up as he stood in front of the microphone. I'm sure he had them written out in his head. You see what I mean? But he never wrote them down on paper. So, if you were going shopping tomorrow for a week shopping and you didn't write a list out, you'd forget a few things. If you're singing a song and you haven't yet decided quite which lyrics to use, and you've written 10 or 12 alternatives to every line, and it's a 3-minute song, and you don't write a single thing down, it's quite amazing. And very often he was just making lyrics up too, just throwing them into the microphone, thinking, oh, that works, that doesn't work. I didn't know that. They were all amazed by it, but so was I.
That's to me, that's really interesting, because I think of, and again, I was a musician myself personally, sort of late 80s through to mid 90s. To me, Freedom 90 was a huge FU to many people, but so much more than that. And so what I find interesting based on that is, like, to me, that seemed like such a organized thought.
Well, I'm sure they were organized thoughts. It's just that he had a brain in which he could write something down, put it in the filing cabinet, and then just access that. And that is extraordinary. I wouldn't trust my brain to do that. I'm sure it's all in there, but it doesn't come out just like that, that song was extraordinary, because it was the moment when he fought with the record company, and his whole personality changed. He had this row with the record company. By the end of Faith, he was really fed up with being too famous and too recognized. And he said, I'm just not going to make another video. I want to be able to walk out the street and just go for a walk, Well, it was never going to happen again. That was an idle hope. But and then he came up with this idea for Freedom, the video, where he wouldn't actually be in it just singing, but the models would sing it and he'd be the director behind the camera. And the record company hated it, said, you can't do that, you've got to be in the video. And I thought about it later. I thought, it's George's fault, because if he'd gone to the record company, didn't say, I don't want to be in the video. If he said, I've got this brilliant idea for a video, I'm going to be a film director, and we get the model, they'd all say, oh, what an amazing idea. It was the way he approached it, very confrontational. But at that moment, George needed to be confrontational. He wanted to say F you to the record company, to the whole record industry, the way it worked. And that really changed him. I mean, immediately after that, he did that tour where he sang other people's songs. I forgot the name of the tour now, but he did Rock in Rio. And if you look at that, I think it's the best concert he ever did. Such bravura, such confidence, so relaxed and happy. and singing other people's songs. So he wasn't involved in his own angst. He was just singing the songs he loved. So that freedom was a huge moment in his life. It gave him freedom.
But it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And to me, using the models, I don't know. I just like it. It was just so brilliant.
What do you mean? He was doing so many things they weren't. He was coming out of the closet, so he burnt a leather jacket in the closet. That's pretty good. Then using the models, singing his voice was perhaps also saying, don't be so gender specific. Here's my words. They're singing it. There was a lot of undertone in there. Not everyone picked up on all the different levels. But it was just certainly all there.
As a musician, it was brilliant. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. So I have goosebumps. So
wow.
Yeah.
But remember, it wasn't a hit in America. It wasn't a hit. It was really. This is a really strange thing. We've jumped forwards through his story, but Faith, which had 5 number ones in America, was not a hit album in the UK. And the British people have an extraordinary knack of seeing beyond the show business image. And they looked at Faith and they said, we always thought he was gay when he was in Wham. Why didn't he come out when he went solo? He's gone the other way. He's gone even straighter, more butcher, the leather jacket. And British people sort of looked at that and thought, well, that's not the real George Michael. When he did Freedom, they all said, welcome. Yes, we like a person who's real. And so from then on, he got hits in Great Britain. So it was really the switch in every way.
And you see that in the doc too, in terms of the success that he continued to have, aside from a couple of things, were very much UK and European centric versus not as much success in the US after that.
I mean, I wouldn't say England or UK is any easier than America to be a star. You still can't walk down the street and nobody recognizes you. But there's an easier, there's less of an adulation feel. There's more of a, how nice of you to be a star and still walk down the street, but can I bother you anyway and get your autograph and have a selfie? Whereas Americans say, oh my God, it's George Michael. And I think it was that which really pissed him off. Because that attracts 10 more stars, it's like throwing the meat to the seagulls and they caw and all the others come, So he was happier at being in the UK, but he wanted success in America and he did regret losing it. He had, he was a multi-layered person. He had enormous desire for success and, he later sued Sony, and really it was about the fact that they paid Michael Jackson a higher royalty than him. He said all sorts of other things why he was suing them, but he was pissed off. They had 2 other artists who got more royalties than him. Why? He wanted the same royalties. There was that sort of slight pettiness in him as well. We've all got all sorts of different levels in us, And what I liked about him was he recognized himself. He understood himself. He knew, he knew who he was, and he admitted that he was doing it for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, he had no qualms about saying, yes, I know I'm popular. Yes, I know I'm rich, but I'm doing this anyways. I'm going to sue them for more money, which was his eventual led him to lose that case against Sony.
In that particular case, he was wrong. The legal basis on which he took the case, he was wrong. I mean, he signed that contract. He'd reaffirmed the contract he'd renegotiated the contract 3 or 4 times. You can't go back and say the original contract was terrible when they said, well, why did you renegotiate it and re-sign to a better deal? He didn't really sue them about it. He sued them for 2 reasons. One, he was pissed off that they got more royalties than him. 3 reasons. The second, he was angry. His boyfriend had died. When people you love die, the first emotion is anger. Always people get very angry when somebody they love dies. So he was angry. And thirdly, he'd heard that a major executive at Sony had called him an English fag. Yeah. And these record contracts hold you for 10 or 15 years. They hold you to your entire life to a record company. It's not like they're a period and you can go somewhere else. Record contracts are pernicious things and they hold you virtually to your professional life. And he thought, why should it be fair that I'm tied to a company where the head of the company can say bad things about me and I can't walk out? I mean, it's, that's what angered him first, tied to the anger and someone's death. Yeah. And then the royalties, the 3 things which had pissed him off. But none of them were a legal base for breaking the contract, unfortunately.
Right.
Absolutely. why, Simon, I wanted to ask you this. Why this documentary at this point in time?
Well, it wasn't really this point in time. It was 2019 that I filmed it all. And
Okay.
just as we filmed it all, we got COVID and all
Yeah.
the post-production houses closed down. And bit by bit, even during COVID, they started opening. But 2020, we were ready to start editing and we couldn't. And so we virtually got postponed for a year then. And we got into it in 2021. And then it took about a year to finish it. So it really was due out about a year ago. Then we had to sort out the music rights, which we hadn't. It always takes a long time. You have to deal with the estate and sort things out. And normally you start doing that when the film's, we'd wasted 2 years before we started that too. So it really was 2 years ago. But you could have asked the same question 2 years ago. Why then?
Yeah.
And the reason was I'd seen a lot of documentaries about George, and they were all very brash, vulgar. I don't want to be anti-American, but very in the tradition of American documentaries. You want, then George did this, and then George thought. How do they know what George thought? You know, it's those commentaries I hated, and I thought let's just get a lot of people who knew him and loved him and worked with him, and maybe even didn't like him. That didn't worry me. I just wanted people who knew him well, and let them talk, and then string that together without any commentary at all, without any comment. The comments are theirs, and they flow together. So there's 90 minutes there without any comment from me, who managed him and knew him, and was the director. And so I was learning from it, which is what I wanted to do, just like everybody else learned from it.
It's interesting because it reminds me of the production reminded me of one of my favorite documentaries. I'm a huge F1 fan of the Senna doc. Because it's really just people, like it's first person account. It's not, as you said, the US, like, and then George went off to blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well done for that.
Well, it's unfair to throw out to America because probably British documentaries is done the same way. But it's usually that. No, I think what I didn't like is the American ones always have that very upbeat voice as the commentator, you know, who thinks he's selling some sort of product. And at least the British ones usually have some dour commentator who bores you to death.
If you could have asked George a question and included his answer in this documentary, what would you have wanted to ask him?
Wow. Well, in a way, we sort of did, because although all those people talk, there's an enormous amount of archive material, and there's over 20 minutes of George talking in the film, which is more than anyone else. No one else in that film talks as much as George does. So in many ways, he's answered so many of the questions. But you know, he's an artist, and artists are compulsive. They're propelled by something inside, usually, a very serious. Usually something happened in childhood, a lack of love at a moment it was needed from someone it was needed by. They usually have a major source of angst inside them, and they don't always know what drives them. I mean, they usually end up in, with a psychologist, which George did too. They're not sure of all the answers. That's every time they create a work of art, they're looking for an answer. You know, there was somebody in the film, he's an art critic, and he said George's solo songs reminded me of Rembrandt's self-portraits. Rembrandt used to paint a self-portrait and then sit and look at it and think, now, who am I? And I think George did the same. And I remember reading once when Elton was in a bad stage of his life, people said he'd go to his room and he'd spend all night listening to his old records. Artists are usually trying to find out who they are, and each piece of art or each song is another way of looking into themselves, trying to find a sort of resolution or a contented way to live. So I don't know if there's any question I'd ask George, because I don't think we get anything more than, I've asked them. They're in the film, and he answers them. And sometimes when you're an artist, because you're on a talk program and you get used to how to do it, and you know how entertainment business works, you always answer questions. You always have an answer. That's what you have to do. But very often the honest answer would be, I really don't know. I don't know why I do it. I don't know why I'm like this. Artists usually learn not to say that. People don't want that answer. But that's probably the most truthful answer. There was a few wonderful questions in the film. There's that Australian interviewer, a really vile man, I thought. I hope he's watching. um, who first questioned the interview is, George, are you gay?
Mhm.
And George, that was halfway through the Faith tour, and George was already out to a lot of his friends.
Yeah.
And he just said, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
And you could see George biting his tongue and thinking, oh, flip, I should have said yes. That was the moment when if he said, yeah, so what? It would have been fantastic. It wouldn't have killed the tour. He's already done half the tour. He'd sold the tickets for the rest. It would have almost slapped that journalist in his face. But he did what he'd learned to do. He said no, and then he had to justify it. And that, it all slipped back 5 more years before he could actually come out and find a way of saying it. But it's a wonderful thing because you can see in George's face the disappointment at himself. Oh God, I said the wrong answer. And then he had to cover it all up.
Yeah.
And you can see, I mean, in the documentary, it's very clear that he was really good with the media. He was polished. He pretty much always had the right answer. Cheeky, sure, but there was he was slick. He was slick.
Yeah, it's an art, and part of the art is covering things up. And of course, George's ambition in life, if you like, was to be open. He always wanted to be honest and frank and open. This is who I am. It's extraordinary when he was with Kenny, his boyfriend of 12 years, how he would sometimes Kenny would be somewhere around at the interview, and he said, I'm going home, and he'd shout out to George, who was actually being filmed live in an interview, going home now, darling. And George said, yeah, bye-bye, blow him a kiss, just like any normal couple. It was wonderfully open and free, and that's how he liked to be. But the problem is, it goes back to what I just said. The media demand an answer, and in a way, giving an answer at all is often dishonest because you don't really have an answer. They say, what were you trying to establish with the songs of this album? And they want an answer, so you find them one. But the reality is, I just wanted to write some songs and go on investigating myself.
Sure.
It's a bit boring.
They don't want to hear that. We talked a bit already about his battle with Sony. You correct me if I'm wrong, but you helped him get out of that Intervision contract, or helped him renegotiate?
I got him out of that one. Yeah.
Tell us about that, and as well, has anything changed in the business?
Well, not much. No, I mean, you stream instead of selling vinyl, but you have artists, you have an audience, and you have the corporate world which monetizes the artist, and they find a way of monetizing. If it's live work or streaming, and that hasn't changed since the 1800s. I mean, then it was sheet music, not records. Now it's streaming, not records. Not much changes, and the artist always starts off saying, all I want is fame, and it'd be nice for a little bit of money to go with it. And then as they get the fame and the success, they say, well, it'd be nice for a bit more money. I mean, we all do that. And the audience just want access to the artist. And that includes not just the music, but, getting to know them, who they are. They want to watch and follow their life, admire them. I mean, every fan sees the artist in a different way. Somebody in the film says it, the artists are like those ink blot tests that psychiatrists give you. Everyone sees them a different way, and everyone sees the artist a different way. They see parts of themselves in the artist. So none of that has changed. And when George signed that contract with Intervision Records, it was a terrible contract. I mean, at that moment in UK, 90% of all record sales were on colored vinyl, which were 12-inch, 78 RPM, no, 45 RPM. 12-inch records which were printed on vinyl with pictures and cartoons, and extended versions. So you'd get a dance song which is 3 minutes long, you'd extend it to 5 minutes, put it on color vinyl. They sold millions. And in that contract, the original contract Wham signed, it said no royalties would be paid on color vinyl. Not for any reason except to avoid paying money, Yeah. And it slipped by. 2 young kids of 18 signed the contract. Oh, we got a record contract, how exciting. And then all the record company did was sold colored vinyl. They didn't sell anything else. So there's millions of pounds going through their account, and George and Andrew getting nothing. But it was a valid contract. I mean, it wasn't as if they hadn't signed it and they had advice and all the things you're meant to do. So we just had to find a way of getting out of it. So yeah, that was something I guided them through.
Wow. And you also, they're famously the first Western band to play in China.
That was breaking America.
It could have been the Rolling Stones. It could have been like a slew of other bands, but it's Wham.
They didn't need what we needed. The first time I sat down to dinner with George and Andrew, he fixed me with a steely eye and he said, "You've got 1 year to make us the biggest group in the world." And I just laughed. I said, "The biggest group in the world has to be the biggest group in America. It's the 60% of the world market. And no one's ever done it. The Beatles took 4 years, for Christ's sake. It's never been done in a year. America doesn't have a national press. It has time difference, which makes national TV difficult. You have to go there and play venues and go and tour again. They get bigger each time. It takes 3 or 4 years at the quickest." And he said, "You've got a year."
Wow.
So my partner jokingly said, "Oh, maybe we can make you the first ever Western group to play in China. Then you'll be on the news every day for a while." And George said, "Yeah, I like that. Go and do that." And I love Asia. So I thought, it's my pass to spending half the next year in Asia. So I went off to China and found myself in the Holiday Inn in Beijing without a proper visa, because foreigners couldn't go to China without an official invitation from the government. And I bypassed that by sneaking in through with a friend I knew in Hong Kong who'd got me over the border. So I was sitting unofficially in a hotel in Beijing with no right to be there. And who could say yes to a Western pop group? Pop culture is the most subversive thing there is in society. Who is going to say yes? One person, Deng Xiaoping, the president of China, probably the second or third most powerful person in the world. And here I was in a Holiday Inn on a rainy evening in Beijing. Yeah, how can I speak to Deng Xiaoping and persuade him to do this?
Wow.
So the next 18 months was doing that, slowly getting to meet him or getting to put the project to him and have him say yes. And I did it by getting to meet ministers by devious means and then buying them wonderful lunches, which they couldn't resist, and then asking them to invite their friends. And each month I went back, the pile got bigger. I started off with one minister and I got a second and a third. And eventually there were 7 or 8 cabinet ministers coming to lunches every time I was there. And finally I found the right one to talk to. It took 18 months, not a year. But 18 months after we had that meeting with George said 1 year, we played China. And on that week, ABS, CBS, NBC, TV in America had them on 24/7, every hour on the hour. And by the end of that week, they were the biggest group in America. We played a stadium tour just 6 weeks later.
Wow.
So 18 months, not a year, but not bad.
Yeah.
That is very good. The documentary is The Real George Michael, Portrait of an Artist. Our guest has been Simon Napier-Bell. Simon, I need to ask you this question before we wrap it up. You famously also managed Sinead O'Connor, who recently passed. Your thoughts on this, I don't know, reluctant superstar?
Yeah, I mean, she was a perfect example of an artist, just as George was. I mean, they suffered some terrible lack of love in their childhood, are searching for it all their lives. They resent the industry, which gives it to them. And so they're fighting with themselves and with an industry which they also worship, because the industry is the one place which is going to, give them to an audience, which will give them that love. Complex people artists are, and Sinead was even more complex than normal. And she was fantastic, wonderful person. But, she was very difficult and very bipolar and up and down. And, she was totally mistrustful of people. She'd been abused really badly, physically kicked and abused by her mother when she was young, lost her trust in people after several bad relationships, and sort of resorted to put her faith in ideas, which is why she changed her religion 4 or 5 times. It's like changing husbands. You change religion. You tried to find a new idea. At least they didn't kick you. And strange enough, she eventually found Islam, which I'm no fan of, but Islam got her singing again. I mean, Islam did what no medicine. She was in and out of mental homes for 2 years after I stopped managing her, and nothing the doctors could do could bring her back to any sort of normal life and get her singing again. And Islam did. So it was the medicine which worked for her.
Wow. How would you? We don't. Sometimes you don't get to choose our story, but if as a manager, if you could figure out a way on how George Michael and Sinead O'Connor were to be remembered. Obviously, you've made this documentary about George, but if you could manage their legacy, how would you approach that?
Well, I guess the way they would like to be remembered. George always talked about not caring about being an artist, caring about being a songwriter. He wanted to be remembered for songs. That's tricky because none of his songs have transcended himself. I mean, if you listen to Careless Whisper or Last Christmas, which is such a masterpiece, or all the later songs, none of them really work without him. You're feeling him as you hear the song. So he is being remembered for what he wanted as a great songwriter, but they are pretty necessarily sung by him. I've never heard a George Michael song as good as when he sings it, or anywhere near as good. And although he sang other people's songs so well, like Rufus Wainwright Going to a Town, and so well that you thought they were George Michael songs. So he's been being remembered 2/3 of what he wanted, plus being a fantastic gay activist and a very generous man who gave away a lot of money. But he wouldn't want to be remembered for that. It was songwriting. Yeah. Sinead, I think, would rather be remembered as someone who actively worked to right the wrongs of Ireland, which happened in Ireland. And that was her major passion, wasn't herself. It was, she transferred all her own pain to Ireland. So her pain became Ireland's pain, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And I think, if she was remembered, she won't be for that. But if she was remembered as being someone who really helped Ireland sort of get freedom from its agonies of the past, I think that's what she'd like. It's a vain hope, because it sort of has got that, but it didn't come through quite the ways that she thought it would. Yeah. I think, other than that, she'd like to be remembered as somebody who people loved and liked, because she didn't get that when she was a child.
Yeah. It was amazing. I didn't know how people reacted to her until she passed, and my family WhatsApp chat group just exploded with people with like fond memories of her and her music. And
isn't it wonderful? A lot of people said, "Oh, why couldn't it be like that if she was alive?" Well, it is difficult. The music industry is an industry, and it is there to sell music and monetize it. Yeah. And for some years, she hadn't made money, hadn't made music which could be monetized, and the industry does drop you. I mean, it's not cynical, and it's not unfriendly. It's just there to sell music, and if you don't make music which could be sold, you get left out. And you saw when she died that she really was loved, and of course, many things happened since she tore the picture up of the Pope in Saturday Night Live. She's been proved pretty well right. That was the right thing to do. And apart from that, the furore over it, she tore a picture up, for Christ's sake. She didn't get up and hit someone. She didn't say go out and kill somebody. She just tore a picture up. Suppose you were having a huge row with you two, this huge row. You can lift your fists up. And instead of lifting your fists up, you say, "I get a picture of Gregg. I'm going to tear your picture up." They say, "What a bunch of pussies you are,"
I think I've got a picture right here. I might do one.
Sorry about that.
A picture of me from the 80s. By the way, our Canadian listeners are going to absolutely appreciate you dropping the Rufus reference there. So,
well, what a wonderful man! I interviewed him for that film in Belfast, and part of interviewing him was, he said, "I'll come to the show tonight," and I actually thought. I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I did 2 hours and I just sit at the piano and play a bit of acoustic guitar." I said, "Is there a band?" He said, "No, I don't have not bothering with the band." And I actually thought, before I went in, 2 hours of a singer just sitting there in a huge, 4,000-seater hall with a piano and a guitar, I'm going to be bored. God, it was the most riveting show. If it had gone on 2 more hours, it would have been not long enough. Yeah. It was fantastic. He had such a compelling way of projecting his songs. And by not having the band, you really listen to the lyrics, and every lyric, every word was worth listening to. Extraordinary songwriter.
Yeah,
The family is very talented. Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Yeah.
Our guest has been Simon Napier-Bell. The documentary is George Michael, the real George Michael, Portrait of an Artist. Simon, thank you so much for your time. This has been really great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Bye.